everyone, welcome to TRARITE. This is PART 365, myself Srija. So today in this session you are going to learn about the anatomy of the middle ear and also the physiology of the middle ear. So in the previous session you have learned about the introduction of the middle ear. Now let's go into the brief description about this. So what is a middle ear? It is a small air-filled cavity which is inside the temporal bone. So it functions as a sound transmitting system connecting the external ear to the inner ear. So what is the location and extent? So where is the middle ear located? It lies between the tympanic membrane and also the oval window which leads to the inner ear. So it is shaped like a box with 6 wells and also it contains the ossicles which are also called as malleus, incus and stapes. So what are the divisions of the middle ear? There are 3 divisions based upon the vertical levels. So epitympanum, the upper part, mesotympanum, the middle portion, and hypotympanum, the lower portion. So what is epitympanum? It is located above the level of the tympanic membrane. You can clearly see this picture. You can find the 3 layers over here: epitympanum, mesotympanum, hypotympanum, and also on the left side you can find the pars flaccida and pars tensa. So this is located above the level of the tympanic membrane. So what does it contain? So this epitympanum, it contains head of the malleus and also body of the incus. So this is a common site for attic cholesteatoma disorder. So poor ventilation in this area makes it prone to the chronic infection. So next is the middle part, mesotympanum. So this is the main central chamber of the middle ear. It is at low level of pars tensa of the tympanic membrane. So these structures are found the handle of malleus, strong long process of incus and stapes, and also the round and oval windows, facial nerves. These are the structures which are found in the region of the mesotympanum. So coming to hypotympanum, which is a lower portion. So this is located below the tympanic membrane. It is mostly an air space containing the air cells. This lies close to the jugular bulb. So a high riding jugular bulb, it may bulge into the hypotympanum. So this leads to the bleeding risk during the ear surgery. So next is, what are the walls of the middle ear? So the middle ear cavity, it is like a cube with 6 walls. So what is the first wall? It is the roof, which is also called as the tegmental wall. So this tegmental wall, it is formed by the tegmen tympani, which is a thin plate of the bone. So this separates the middle ear, which is located in the below, and it also separates the middle cranial fossa or the brain, which is located at the above. So if infected otitis media, the pus can erode this thin bone, which leads to intracranial complications like meningitis or the brain abscess. So what is the role of the middle ear mostly? It transmits the sound vibrations from eardrum to ossicles, then to oval window. It amplifies sound by 20 to 30 times than the external ear. So next is, the second wall is floor, which is also called as the jugular wall. So what it is a thin plate of a bone that forms the floor of the middle ear. It lies directly above the jugular bulb, which is a dilated part of the internal jugular vein. So why it is important? So this wall is very thin, sometimes even dehiscent with small gaps. So infection from the middle ear, it can erode the bone, which can spread downward. So which leads to bleeding complications or jugular bulb thrombosis. So the third wall is lateral wall. So lateral wall, what is the main component of the lateral wall? It's the tympanic membrane or the eardrum, which forms most of the lateral wall. So above the eardrum, there is a small bony wall through which the chorda tympani nerve passes. So now what is chorda tympani nerve? It is a branch of the 7th cranial facial nerve. So this carries the taste from anterior 2/3 of the tongue. It also supplies the salivary glands like submandibular and sublingual glands. So chronic otitis media or surgery may injure this nerve, which leads to loss of taste, dry mouth and also the metallic taste sensation. So next is the fourth wall is medial wall, which is also called as the labyrinthine wall. So labyrinthine wall, it is the most important wall because it separates the middle ear from the inner ear. So what are the structures present in this medial wall? Oval window, round window, premonitory, facial nerve canal and lesser petrosal nerve. So oval window, this is where the stapes foot plate fits. So this transmits the sound vibrations to the inner ear. So round window means it acts as a pressure release for vibrations entering the inner ear. And the premonitory. Premonitory, it's a bulge formed by the basal turn of the cochlea. And the facial nerve canal. So it contains the tympanic segment of the facial nerve, which is a seventh cranial nerve. And also it runs just above the oval window. And next is lesser petrosal nerve. So this carries the parasympathetic fibers to parotid glands. So these are the structures which are formed in the which are found in the medial wall. So why this wall is very much clinically important? Because otitis media, they can erode the bone, which resulting in the facial nerve palsy. So surgery in this region must avoid damaging the oval or round windows, so which prevents the vertigo and the hearing loss disorders. So the fifth wall is anterior wall, which is also called as the carotid wall. So this lies close to the internal carotid artery, making it a dangerous area during the surgery. So what does it contains? The opening of the eustachian tube and the entrance of the tensor tympani muscle. So this opening of the eustachian tube, it connects the middle ear to the nasopharynx. So it helps in the ventilation and also the pressure equalization. And then entrance of the tensor tympani muscle, here the muscle that dampens the loud sounds. So it helps in the chewing and also the shouting. So blockage of this eustachian tube, it leads to negative pressure in which the otitis media with effusion occurs. So these are all about the 5 walls. So the 6th wall is posterior wall, which is also called as the mastoid wall. So this contains adductus, pyramidal eminence and also the chorda tympani passage. So what is adductus? It's a opening into mastoid antrum. Pyramidal eminence, it contains the stapedius muscles. So then is the chorda tympani passage. So infection spreads via adductus, which leads to mastoiditis. So in the previous slide, you can see the picture of the middle ear, where you can see all the walls of the middle ear. So it shows the tegment tympani, which is a roof, internal carotid artery, which is the anterior wall, and internal jugular vein, which is the floor, facial nerve wall, oval and round windows. See, this is the oval one, which is in the center, and the round windows. Round window is here, and promontory, which is a bulge of cochlea. This is the promontory, which is the center of the square box over here. And you can also see this auditory or eustachian tube. So this helps you to visualize the relation of the middle ear with major blood vessels. So the facial nerve running inside its canal. So how the ossicles interact with the oval window and how the sounds travel through the middle ear, you can find this in this diagram. So next is ossicles of the middle ear. So what are the ossicles of the middle ear? It contains 3 smallest bones in the human body: malleus, incus and stapes. So malleus is also called as hammer, incus is also called as anvil, and stapes is also called as stirrup. So together they form the ossicular chain, which transmits the sound from the tympanic membrane to the inner ear. So let's talk about malleus, the first bone, which is also called as hammer. So the malleus, it's the head of the malleus. It lies in the epitympanum layer. So the handle of the malleus, which is called as manubrium, this is firmly attached to the tympanic membrane. So this is why the eardrum moves whenever sound waves hit it. So what are the parts of the malleus? Head, which articulates with the body of the incus. Neck, which is the narrow part of below the head. Manubrium, which is also called as handle, and this is attached to the tympanic membrane. The tip of the handle forms the umbo, which is the center of the eardrum, and then the lateral process and anterior process. So lateral process that produces a small bulge on the eardrum, whereas the anterior process, the ligament attachment to the stabilize the malleus. So what are the functions of the malleus? It receives vibrations from the tympanic membrane. So it transfers these vibrations to the incus. So this is the role of the malleus in the middle ear. So the next part is incus, which is also called as anvil. So this is located centrally between malleus and stapes. So this forms the middle link of the ossicular chain. So what are the parts of the incus? Body, long process and short process. So body, it articulates with the head of the malleus, whereas long process, it ends in the lenticular process which connects to the stapes. So this is the part which is responsible for transmitting the vibrations to stapes again. So then is this short process. So short process, it is anchored to the posterior wall of the middle ear. Now what is the function of the incus? It acts as a lever to amplify the sound. It conducts the vibrations from malleus to stapes. So in the right side, you can find the picture of the malleus. So malleus is connected to the tympanic membrane. So the incus is behind it. You can clearly see this picture. And the joint is the incudomalleolar joint. The tympanic cavity is around them. The tympanic cavity is here. And then there are two views of the malleus again. Anterior view and lateral view. Here you can find the manubrium, which is a handle. This is attached to the tympanic membrane. And then head, it is articulating with the incus. And lateral process and anterior process, these are visible. And the position of the ossicles inside the middle ear cavity. So this helps you to understand or visualize how the sound travels. So sound travels from eardrum to malleus, from malleus to incus, from incus to stapes, stapes to inner ear. So this is what you have to remember. Okay. So next is stapes. Stapes is the third bone in the human body, which is the smallest bone in the total human body. So it is shaped like a stirrup, which is a ring-like horse riding tool. So finally, it's a final ossicle in the chain, which is malleus, incus and stapes. So what are the parts of these stapes which are shown in the diagram over here? The head also called as the capticulum or capitulum, which articulates with the lenticular process of the incus. And then neck is a narrow portion below the head, and anterior and posterior crura. So these are the two arch-like legs. So again, the base of foot plate, it fits into the oval window. This is the oval window, right? Yeah, this fits into the oval window. So what is the function of the stapes? So the foot plate, it vibrates against the oval window. It transmits the sound waves into the inner ear fluids, which is called as the perilymph. So this converts the mechanical energy into hydraulic energy and then into the nerve signals. So there are ossicular joints. There are two joints which transmit sound efficiently. There are malleoincudal joint and incudostapedial joint. So malleoincudal joint, this is located between both the malleus and incus. So this is a synovial saddle joint which allows a limited gliding. So this is very stable and also rarely dislocates spontaneously. So next joint is incudostapedial joint, which is a ball and socket joint. So this transmits fine vibrations with the minimal friction. So what are the middle ear muscles? So there are two muscles which control the ossicle movement and also protects the inner ear from the loud sounds. So what are the two muscles? Tensor tympani and then stapedius in the next slide. So let's discuss about tensor tympani over here. What is the origin of tensor tympani? It is the cartilage of the auditory tube. So this is a greater wing of the sphenoid. It is a temporal bone. So it is inserted at the handle of the malleus, which is also called as manubrium. So how does the nerve supply is done? Through mandibular nerve, which is a V3 nerve, and it is also a branch of the trigeminal nerve. So what is the function of this tensor tympani? It pulls the malleus medially, so that it tightens the tympanic membrane and then it reduces the vibration. So what is the role of this tensor tympani? It is a protective reflex for loud noises like chewing and shouting and also a sudden sounds. So this prevents over the vibration of the malleus. So what is the important point you have to remember about tensor tympani? This function may contribute to the tensor tympani syndrome, causing ear fullness, tinnitus, or also the clicking sounds. Yeah, the function of the tensor tympani is it tenses the tympanic membrane, nothing but it makes the eardrum tighter. And also it reduces the amplitude of loud internal sounds such as chewing, swallowing, and this prevents these self-generated sounds from overwhelming the ear. And then the second muscle is stapedius muscle. So it comes from the pyramidal eminence, which is a small bony projection in the middle ear. So where it is inserted, it attaches to the neck of the stapes, which is the smallest bone in the body. And nerve supply is done through seventh cranial nerve, that is a facial nerve. Now what is the function of the stapedius? It prevents the or it controls the movement of the stapes. It prevents the excessive vibration of the stapes when loud sound enters. So this protects the inner ear from the damage. So in simple words, this stapedius acts like a shock absorber for the loud noises. So next is paralysis. So what is paralysis? It's whenever the facial nerve is damaged, it leads to stapedius muscle, it becomes weak. So this causes the hyperacusis condition. So what do you mean by hyperacusis condition? Every day the sounds feel abnormally loud because this tape's movement is not controlled. This results in the paralysis condition. So next is eustachian or auditory tube. So auditory tube or eustachian tube, it is a canal connecting the middle ear to the nasopharynx. Nasopharynx is nothing but it's a upper throat behind the nose. So what is the length of this tube? 36 millimeters. So what are the parts? Lateral part 1/3 is bony and medial part 2/3 is cartilaginous part. So what is the main function of this eustachian tube? It equalizes the air pressure across the tympanic membrane. For example, when ears pop in an airplane and it drains fluid from the middle ear to the throat and also it provides the ventilation to the middle ear. Now, at the right side, you can see a picture. The upper picture is, it shows the tensor tympani muscle which is attached to the malleus. It shows the stapedius muscle which is attached to the stapes, and this highlights how they reduces the loud vibrations. And in the lower picture, it shows the ear from a side, like it shows the tympanic membrane, it shows the ossicles and also the stapedius muscles pulling on the stapes, and also the facial nerve, which is seventh cranial nerve, running close to the stapedius muscle over here. So it helps you to explain why damage to facial nerve leads to stapedius paralysis, leading to hyperacusis condition. So as we discussed, the functions of eustachian tube are equalizing the air pressure, draining the middle ear secretions, and also ventilating the middle ear. So it supplies fresh air to the middle ear cavity. It helps to keep the middle ear healthy and aerated. So now why children get more otitis media, which is an important point you have to remember, is in children the eustachian tube is shorter, wider and more horizontal. So because of this, germs from the throat easily reach the middle ear. So fluid drains poorly. So this increases the risk of otitis media, which is a middle ear infection. So this is about the eustachian tube. And then coming to mastoid air cells. So what are mastoid air cells? What are they? First, so they are the tiny honeycomb like air-filled cavities inside the mastoid process. So these are part of the temporal bone which is present behind the ear. So they look like the small air pockets within the bone. So how does the communication takes place? So they are connected to the middle ear through the mastoid antrum. They share the same mucosal lining as the middle ear. So what are the functions of the mastoid air cells? They act as an air reservoir, nothing but they store the air and they help to keep the pressure inside the middle ear stable. So it also helps the maintain pressure. So it works with the eustachian tube to maintain the normal air pressure in the middle ear. It also helps the eardrum to vibrate normally, and it protects the middle ear structures. So they reduce the effect of the pressure and sound waves on the delicate middle ear structures. They also act like a shock absorber for the ear. So this is about the anatomy of the middle ear. So next is the physiology of the middle ear. So what are the functions of the middle ear? So the middle ear, it has two major functions. So one is transmitting the sound, nothing but carrying vibrations to the inner ear, and then the other is to amplify the sound, to make the vibration strong enough to move to the inner ear fluid. So the first is sound transmission. So pathway of the sound vibrations is sound waves, it travels to tympanic membrane, then to malleus, then to incus, stapes, oval window, inner ear fluids. So sound waves hit the eardrum and make it vibrate. So this vibration, they passes through the ossicles, ear ossicles that are malleus, incus and stapes. And this stape foot plate, it pushes the oval window and sending vibrations into the fluid of the inner ear. So this chain of bones works like a mechanical bridge that carries sound from air to the inner ear. So the second function is impedance matching, which is also called as the amplification. So why is amplification needed for the middle ear? Because the sound travels easily in the air, nothing but the external ear. So but the inner ear, it is filled with the fluid which resists the sound movement. So without amplification, most sound would be reflected back and hearing would be very poor. So the middle ear, it boosts the vibrations so that they can move the inner ear fluid effectively. So what are the mechanisms of the impedance watching? There are three ways the middle ear increases the sound strength, like area, ratio, effect. So the tympanic membrane area, it is much larger than the oval window. So same force on a smaller area, it creates a greater pressure, right? So this gives about 20 to 25 dB amplification. So the second mechanism is lever action of the ossicles. So these ossicles, they act like a lever system. So malleus is longer than incus. This produces a lever advantage. So this gives the additional amplification around 2 to 3 dB. So the third mechanism is buckling of the tympanic membrane. In this, the eardrum does not vibrate at all as a flat sheet. It just buckles inward. So this increases the malleus, adding another 4 to 6 dB of the amplification. So total amplification combination, it creates about around greater than 30 dB, which is enough to push the inner ear fluid effectively. So this is about the impedance matching and its mechanisms. So the third function is the middle ear reflex, which is also called as the acoustic reflex. So what it is? It's a protective reflex that activates in response to the loud sounds which are greater than 80 dB. So what are the muscles involved in this middle ear reflex? Stapedius muscle and also the tensor tympani muscles which are present in the middle ear. So what they do? They contract and stiffen the ossicular chain. So this reduces the transmission of loud vibrations to the inner ear. It also helps to protect the delicate inner ear structures, especially the hair cells. So next is eustachian tube physiology. So what are the functions of eustachian tube? It connects the middle ear to the nasopharynx, nothing but the back of the nose. It normally stays closed but opens briefly during the swallowing, yawning and chewing. So what are the functions of the eustachian tube? It maintains the equal air pressure. It equalizes the pressure between the middle air and also the outer atmosphere. So equal pressure keeps the tympanic membrane in the correct position so that it vibrates normally. So it prevents the tympanic membrane retraction. So whenever a pressure inside the middle ear becomes too low, the eardrum can get pulled inward. So opening of this tube, it prevents this by balancing the pressure. So then it drains mucus from the middle ear to nasopharynx. So middle ear, it produces small amounts of fluid or mucus. So this eustachian tube, it carries this fluid to the nasopharynx, preventing the fluid buildup and also the ear infections. And the fourth one is It protects the middle ear. It also keeps secretions, bacteria and loud pressure changes from reaching the middle ear directly. So the fifth function is mastoid air cell physiology. So mastoid air cells, we have already discussed about this. So they are honeycomb-like air spaces within the mastoid part of the temporal bone. They are connected to the middle ear through the mastoid antrum. So the main functions of this are they maintain an air reservoir, like they act like a backup air tank. They assist in the pressure equalization, nothing but they buffer sudden changes in the pressure. They also protect the middle ear from temperature changes. So sudden temperature changes could affect the eardrum vibration, right? So these air cells, they act as a thermal insulators, protecting the delicate structures. And at last, they support the ossicular vibrations. So they help to maintain an air-filled, low-resistant environment. So this ensures the smooth movement of ossicles and also the effective sound transmission. So these are about the functions of the middle ear. So this is for today's session. So in the next session, you're going to learn about the anatomy and physiology of inner ear. So thank you. Have a good day.